Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 280, recorded at Big Dog Studios in Eugene, Oregon. Today's show is brought to you by Everlasting Herb Farm at the Real Herb Market. Wendy makes each of her botanicals from herbs she grows on her family farm in Vermont. All of her herbal products are handcrafted with care. Give yourself the gift of natural healing from Everlasting Herb Farm at the Real Herb Market. You don't know what to do when you grow up. Not to worry. Plants will lead you in the right direction no matter where you've gotten your start. They have a knack for merging disparate paths. Today we're talking with Dawn Laska-Tomkerdahl, RN, Master Herbalist, Registered Herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild and owner of Dawn's Enchanted Garden, about finding an herbal path. Now here are your hosts.
I'm Candace Hunter.
I'm Patrick Hunter.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Hey Dawn, it is so lovely to see you today.
It is lovely to talk to you as well.
I have been trying to get you on the show for years.
I know. I'm so glad I'm here. I've just come to that point where I listen to podcasts. I'm like, wow, I need to do this. So, yeah.
Well, I think you were really busy because you had, for a long time, you had disparate paths. Then you had sort of semi-melded paths. Then you had multiple careers happening all at once. I mean,
yes.
Honestly, what you get done in like probably just the morning is more than I think most of us get done for 3 weeks. I mean,
I've been told that I get more done in one day than most people get done in a week. So.
Yeah. You're high energy.
Not high maintenance, just high energy.
I didn't say maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. Low maintenance. I'm pretty casual.
So you're an RN and you are an herbalist who's done a lot of teaching and product development, and you've done a lot of like national speaking tours and things like that. And you've run a school, and you've also
I've written a book.
And you didn't start any of this as your first career.
Nope.
You were a jet mechanic.
Yep, I worked on fighter planes in the Air Force, F-16 specifically, and I was a jet engine mechanic.
See?
So you can move from engine mechanic in the Air Force to helping people get their minds right with herbs, get their bodies right with herbs, with plants.
Yes, and really it's all about fixing things. There's a common theme, right? You're fixing a jet engine. You're fixing a person's health. I invented a tool in the military, and I create formulations now. So really it's the same thing, just a little different model.
I know at one point you were thinking about being an engineer, and I'm so glad you didn't go that route.
Me too. I'm horrible at math. It would have been a bad fit for me.
So how did you, so you went from there, and then what was the catalyst, the moment that you said, I want to do this?
Yeah. How did you find the plants? Did you know them before the military? What was the deal there?
So my grandmother is part Native American. She's half Native American. She was half Native American. And so I grew up kind of around plants, and she wouldn't know the Latin name. Like we always look for the Latin name, right? She wouldn't know the Latin name. She would know the common name. And she goes, my grandfather did X with this plant. Or my grandfather knows this plant as blah, blah, blah. So I grew up around them and using them. And my grandmother made odd references to like she put Vicks Vapor Rub on her head, right? Yeah. And she said, my grandfather used a plant that smells just like this for headaches. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So as an adult, I was in the military, and I actually had severe migraines. Okay. And so when my friend said, sniff this lavender oil, it'll help with your migraine. And there you go. That's the transition point. It took one sniff of essential oils, and then I was on this lifelong path.
And then you became an aromatherapist.
Yes. So I did that for about 2 years, studying intensely. And then I was like, well, these essential oils are plants, so let's just make that transition to plants. And I'm glad I did. So.
And now I'm assuming, although maybe it is a big assumption, that aromatherapy and herbalism are really all one. You combine them all kind of together rather than keeping them separate, as was the, I'm going to say, old way in American herbalism for a long time.
I use everything that works. So, and the properties are similar, so I use them in a similar fashion. Yeah,
Nice.
it makes it easy.
So Candace is
I'm
really
looking.
just
I'm
not
looking.
on fire this morning. Wow. She's usually such a talkative person.
Sorry. I'm thinking about how when I first met you years ago, I think my son was born. I can't remember if I met you just before. I think I met you just after.
I think just after he was born. Yeah,
Yeah, and we were
that was a
dealing.
long time ago.
Yeah, and we were dealing with thrush with him.
Yes.
It was really awful, and you suggested gentian purple, which we did, and it worked.
Mhm.
And I'm sure it was unpleasant for him. Now that
Oh,
I've,
yeah.
as an adult, tasted gentian, I'm like, oh, that probably was not a great way to be enjoying your first few months of eating. But
That boy's always had yeast problems.
yeah, he's probably not going to thank you for saying that either.
And then we worked on you because
Yes.
that was part of that whole process.
Yes.
And so it all came
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. And I vaguely remember that you introduced me to essential oils and tinctures at the same time. And I don't think I did teas, but maybe I did. I can't remember.
I think you did a few teas. Yeah,
I probably
you did.
did.
You started with making teas and starting herbalism, and yeah, it's funny on one of your podcasts I was listening to. You repeated something I taught you, and
Oh,
I
did
was
I?
like, I know that specifically from me because that's how I discovered it. So yeah,
I hope I credited it. Did I credit you?
No.
No, what was it? I want to know what it
I
was.
can't even remember.
Oh,
I've been listening to all your podcasts in a row.
thank you.
Are you
I
binging
feel
our
bad.
podcast?
I am.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
after Candace had seen you, she recommended that I see you, and I had some gastro IBS stuff that I just couldn't seem to stop, and it was all dietary, and I didn't know that at the time. Minnesota, where it's all the same, meat, potatoes, dairy, all the time.
It's the white and neutral diet,
right? The white and neutral. But that opened my eyes to what could be done. I mean, working with you, it changed everything, and the full. I mean, I got teased because I was drinking this god awful onion soup, gallons of it. It seemed like. And my friends I was doing it at work, and they were just teasing me. And they said, "Don't get that out of here. Go eat somewhere else." They couldn't handle the smell. But it cleared it up, and I rarely ever have that problem again. I don't eat as much dairy anymore, but I can eat dairy. So thank you for that. So there you go.
So when as we've just pretty much said, we had a lot of things that were going on that Western medicine wasn't really helping, yet it wasn't that we were anti-Western medicine at the time. It just, herbalism worked really well. Have you found that the intersection of you, because you're also a registered nurse, has that informed your herbalism well?
It has. And I've actually, it's funny because the aromatherapy and the herbalism all goes together, and you can use it with modern medicine. I remember working in the hospital as a nurse, and they would always give me the crazy patients, the quote unquote crazy patients.
Yes.
Because Dawn always I called it my pocket full of fun. And it was 3 or 4 essential oils that I always carried with me that, if someone was agitated, I would take my little lavender oil and put a drop on their foot.
Nice.
Now, it didn't interact with them personally, obviously, but they were inhaling it and they calmed down.
Yeah.
Or if I had a patient that had something else, I had something in my pocket at all times that I could, either put a drop on their pillow, or I could, create a foot bath and put like a drop or 2 of essential oil in there, and it would make them better. So there was a very clear dynamic between what I saw from in modern medicine and how I could treat it with herbs. That was in the very beginning, and then as I got better, I started looking at their charts and doing facial diagnosis and looking at their face and seeing if I could see what was in their chart on their face and in their tongue. So I can actually see the disease as it was happening, or I could see the disease before they even knew they had it. So someone who had one of the classic signs for people who have, and I wish people could see me, is certain points on your ear show precursor to colon cancer.
Ah.
And so I would be able to look at their ears and say, oh, I see a dot there. And they would get a scope because they had, gastric upset.
Yeah.
And so or some kind of, bowel issue. And so they would go up and do a scope and they would see precancerous tumors or cancerous tumors.
Nice.
So I could see it actually exhibited in their face before it even showed up in their symptom picture. Let's say.
Yeah, that sounds like the doctors may have been accusing you of being kind of a witchy person then, because that's kind of, that seems mystical almost.
It's not. It's logic.
Yeah.
It's not a logic that we understand in Western medicine. It's been around in Chinese medicines for thousands and thousands of years, and they did it by studying people.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so well known. It's been documented in, I think, a book that's 3,000 years old. So I mean,
oh yeah,
it's well known. It's funny. I recently had an episode where I had a fib, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize it. And then there's a reason. I was taking something that was causing a fib, right?
Ooh, whoops.
But right up to my nose started getting really red. So my nose got really bright red. I was like, ooh, something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Something's wrong with my part, but what is it? And I was like, I couldn't figure it out. And then one day my nose was bright red, and then I went and ate fib.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I have been amazed too. I haven't taken or studied nearly as much as you have, but there are little things that, I've noticed in people, and then, conversing with them, and then come to find out, the thing that I guess they might have, or the personality trait I guess they might have, just by looking at, the shape of their nose or whatever. There's so much that we really do wear right on our skin, right outside, And
it just takes someone who's observant enough to find it and look at it and talk to the patients or the clients and say, hey, I see this, and what's going on, and do you have any symptoms that are like XYZ? Just doing some basic investigating.
And do you find it hard to talk about any of that with like the doctors or the other nurses or the people in modern medicine that are steeped in that?
So most of the nurses are very open and receptive to alternative healing. We, as a profession, have done holistic healing since the beginning. Back rubs. I mean, scientifically, only recently they discovered that touch actually does make a difference. So that basic function of giving a back rub is healing.
Yeah.
So nurses easy, doctors not so much. Even the Indian ones, which I find surprising, if they grew up in India, their grandmother and their mother gave them herbs.
Yeah.
They still poo-poo it, and I'm like, the research is there. Let's see. So doctors, not as much, but everybody understands that other people have different methods of healing. Yeah. And at least they're open to a certain degree to hearing about it.
So when you decided to start training as a nurse, did you find it challenging to also have the plant side of yourself? Like, was it like two separate sides, or?
It was. I actually had to I felt like I split myself in half most days because, there was this hippie / hippie chick who's doing all the herbs and all the aromatherapy and like lighting incense and like, creating things and being a mad scientist, right? And then the other side, who's a respected nurse, a cardiac nurse who's taking care of patients as they're dying or, whatever they have to go through. So it was different. But then I really learned to integrate it over time. And I think that's one of the opportunities we have as herbalists is really to talk to people in healthcare professions and really, befriend them and say, hey, listen, I can help your patients who may not be interested in having cholesterol meds. I can give them herbs that'll work just as good as it's safer than what you're going to give them. So, and a lot of doctors are open to that because they have to be, because that's what the patients are demanding.
Nice. So would you say there was any one like defining moment when you made your name, if you will, amidst the doctors as an herbalist that actually knows what she's doing? Like a moment when you said, oh, you know, I noticed this, and they suddenly said, oh my God, she actually really does get this. Do you have a moment?
Yeah, I was a nurse in a cardiology clinic, and my doctors, I work with cardiologists and interventionalists, and they're very businesslike and very research. And so I was like, I went into a patient's room and I looked at their face and I said, okay, I see this X, Y, and Z, and here's their medical history, and here's their diet, and here's what I see, and here's what I suggest you do. And I said, they need an echo, I need a stress test, and they're going to have to do a cath lab. I'm going to bet money that they will need a bypass. And they're like, what? They're like, Dawn, you should become a cardiologist and not a nurse. And I go, nope, I need my beauty sleep. Nope, not going to do it. So yeah, so it was that integrative piece, and this man was very unhealthy, and we had a really good, honest talk where I said, listen, this diet, classic Minnesota diet, bratwurst 3 times a week, standard, meat and potatoes. I go, tater tot casseroles were his favorite, I think.
Yeah, that's why I call it the neutral and white plate. Yeah.
And so we had a good, honest talk. And I go, you have to eat some vegetables. And I'm like, I don't care if you put bacon fat on it or something. Just eat some vegetables.
Yeah,
like,
right.
And we talked about diet. And he's like, well, what else can I do? And I go, well, I know this nutritional therapist who also does some herbs and Chinese medicine. I want you to go see this person.
Yeah.
And so as a nurse working in my clinic, I couldn't refer them to myself, obviously. Yeah. So really it was just a matter of getting them to the right person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's one of the things that, I mean, even now in just your standard doctor's clinic offices, where most of us start out when something's not quite right, I still see the doctors, I had a doctor say to me after telling me I might have cancer when I really had strep throat and I knew it. She was also like, and you can't, so she gave me the antibiotics. She's like, you can't take any herbs while you're on this. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? I can't have basil on my food. What are you actually trying to say to me? And she really didn't know what that meant. And I was astounded. I'm like, you're a doctor. You don't know what you're telling. You're the advice. You don't understand the advice you're giving me. I think that they struggle because they don't have a lot of education in simple things like the difference between herbs as food and herbs that you might take in a tincture or a tea form for slightly stronger herbs.
I actually do teaching at medical schools. So I actually go into medical schools, not all the time. They usually request me, once or twice, maybe once a year, to go into a school or two. And so I go and I do basic 1 hour lecture on herbalism. And I bring in scientific research, and I bring in double blinds, all the all the excuses they give me. I bring them those research studies.
Yes.
And I say, this is a chemical. There's a plant that has chemicals in it, and this is how you get to the brains.
Yeah.
These chemicals interact with our body just like modern medicine does. Yeah. And then I tell them that 50% of our modern pharmacy is from plants.
Yes.
I tell them, this data goes back hundreds of years before we even had modern studies on plants and medicine. So it really hits home to them. And then I make them taste some things, which is always fun because they're always like,
yeah.
But doctors only get 2 hours on nutrition.
That is not enough. I mean, as a jet mechanic, what would you have said if they said, oh yeah, and of all your training, you're going to get less than 1% on the fluids we put into the system? I mean, that does not make any sense.
That's how it works in our modern medicine. And so the fact that I'm able to go in for an hour and lecture them on, plants and the science behind the plants makes a big difference, because then they'll call me afterwards. So they'll get out of residency me, and they'll call me. Actually in Minnesota, I had a whole network of physicians that I talked to on a regular basis. They would do curbside consults with me.
Nice.
So my patient's on this weird medication. They're on this medication, and they have these herbal formulas. What am I doing here? What's wrong?
Yeah.
And so we would walk through it. It really did make a big difference because, patients are afraid sometimes to tell their doctors they're on herbs.
Oh, yeah.
Because doctors poo-poo them.
Oh, yeah.
And physicians don't know to ask if they're on herbs or supplements, even though they're supposed to, but they don't.
Yeah.
Because they don't really know that much about it. What if someone tells you they're on a complex supplement regime or taking all these herbs? They won't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, even if someone tells you they're on just this one herb, if you haven't got training, you don't necessarily know how that herb will or won't affect the pharmaceuticals you're about to prescribe. You know, I mean, something like nettles can have a big impact on how well certain pharmaceuticals will process in the body, and therefore make a big difference in how the levels should be. Right. And if that person goes off nettles abruptly without, telling their physician, that can make a huge difference and a possible problem for them.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Yeah, one of the things I have been finding really wonderful and heartening, at least in the community here, is that I'm seeing more and more doctors starting to look at how the herbs work, or at least awareness of them. And some of them are starting to make recommendations on, small recommendations on herbs and nutrition alongside the rest of the regimen that they're doing. And it seems like it's slow, but it's changing. And
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the education they get is usually a weekend class.
Yeah.
So as you know, studying herbs is not a weekend class. It is a lifetime.
Yes.
A weekend class, you don't learn hardly anything. So that's what they're basing their recommendations on. Yeah. It's better to, as an herbalist, to create a network with other providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, pharmacists. Create that network, and then really be able to reach out to them, have them reach out to you as the expert. And I'm doing air quotations, because you have to establish yourself as an expert in the modern medicine field. And luckily, as an RN, I can do that because I have both credentials.
Yeah.
But anybody can do it. They just have to form a good relationship and make sure they bring up the science.
Yeah.
Because we know elderberries works in a certain way. It's done that for thousands and thousands of years, right?
Right.
Since the beginning of time. And now the research comes out, and the research is great. Well, yeah, we've known this for a long time.
Yes, and actually, I am so glad you said that, because, I mean, being able to speak both the language as a tradition and the language of science is something I've been talking about on the podcast, I think, from the very beginning. And I know how important it is. When I first came to herbalism, I was it's not that I didn't understand the language of science. I was a technical writer, it was fine, but it wasn't what resonated with me. And so you introduced me to herbs, but I didn't pick up any books yet. I just did the things you suggested. At the time, I didn't have, if there even was internet X stuff, I have no clue. It was long enough. Yeah. I don't think there was much there. So I was doing what you said and giving things a try. And I had like a couple of directory style herb books where they had like 1,000 herbs in 150 pages or something like that, And you made a comment at one point about how, and I get to take a class this weekend with Matthew Wood. And I was like, oh, great. It sounded like probably a Hollywood name I should know, but I didn't really. And at the time I was just, I didn't think about it. And then a few weeks later, I went into the present moment where you guys both happened to work, and he happened to be the person that was helping me, though I didn't know it at the time. And he gave me a formula, and I went home, and it was great, and it worked. And then 6 months later, we moved to Oregon, and I was in an herb shop here, and I saw this book, and I was like, Matthew Wood, why does that name sound familiar? well, I'm going to get this book. It's a tome. It's the Herbal Wisdom, Matthew Wood's Book of Herbal Wisdom. It's a big, thick book. And it's all very much energetic language, the language of traditional Western medicine. Absolutely resonated with me so deeply. I really, I understood everything he was saying, even though I had no training in that. And in the learning I've had since, where I've actually had training on what these things said, it turns out I really was understanding it. And it was through the years of making that bridge that has made herbalism something I can talk about with people, because it isn't just some weird mystical thing. It's really scientific, and it's just about the language you're using. The actions are still the same. Yeah, the actions are all the same. Yeah. And I did eventually put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. She learned from one of the greats. Oh.
He is awesome. He's a great guy, and it's super nice, and I love him to death. So we're good friends now. I haven't taken a class from him in years, but now I teach.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're teaching with him.
Yeah, I feel very honored, honestly, to be at that level where he wants to have me as a teacher in his school.
Oh yeah,
and that's pretty. I feel very honored. So
yeah, and you're I know you're an incredible addition to his school.
Oh, thank you.
You ever wanted to learn about plant medicine, Googled the plant, and only found stuff written by medical database sites or celeb docs who don't seem to use the herbs themselves? The Practical Herbalist has loads of articles on herbs and plant-based medicines, all written by experts who actually study and work with the plants every day. At The Practical Herbalist, you'll find info on traditional and modern uses of herbs that's supported by science yet still practical for real people. Visit thepracticalherbalist.com.
So let's talk about herbal schools. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So there is a lot of ways to get education out there. There's herbal schools, there's online. But when we talk about learning from someone like Matthew Wood, right? Yeah. Or Candace Canton, or anybody that's really, really been in the field for 30 years, right? You have people who are in the, and this is going to go back to social media in just a moment, which is going to be a funny part. Matthew Wood, all these people who've been around for the tiaras, 30, 40, 50 years, doing herbalism grassroots and learning from experience and reading all the literature they can get and the research studies and the, taking classes from each other, because that's how we all learn, right? Yeah. We all each other. I took classes from Candace Canton and learned something I never learned before. So these are the things that we share back and forth, and it's a healing tradition based on oral tradition, really. Basically, you keep learning from someone orally, and there's stuff to read as well. But you really learn by doing and experimenting, and just really keep broadening your experience with things. So we have teachers like Matthew and like the Tiaras and all these different people that are amazing, right? And I've learned from them, so I've become pretty good. Not as good as them maybe, but I'm pretty good in a different way, because I have a different skill set than someone else does. So the facial diagnosis and tongue diagnosis is really where I have fine-tuned my skills, because I've seen, I think I calculated it out to be 6,000 or 7,000 charts. Yeah. So I've seen 6,000 about patients, and I've seen their medical conditions, and I've looked at their face. Yeah. And so because I've seen that many people in my short time as an herbalist, like 20 some odd years, I've actually grown where that's my expertise now. Yeah. So, and it's hilarious, because you think you can go to the internet and learn things, right? But there's only so much you can learn on the internet just from Google searching, what is Tulsi used for, right? There's only so much you can learn. A lot of that is experimental. And experiential. So not just experimental, but experiential. You have to experience it, and you have to see it, and how the herbs work with somebody else and how they have a reaction. So do you remember when we first did pulse testing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we did pulse testing on you, and you learned it, and you picked up the supplements or the tinctures, and you could feel the change in your own pulse.
Yeah.
And I teach that to my clients and I teach that to students. And that's just a basic experience of seeing how the herbs work and
Yeah.
how good they work and how quickly. Just by holding a bottle of tincture or putting a drop on your wrist, your body responds instantly.
Yes.
So that's just pretty amazing. So, and I just love it when we go to Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And you have someone say, "Oh, I've got a bump on my leg," and they're like, "Oh, they're diagnosing the bump."
Right.
And they're saying use, bloodroot on that, and you're like, no, that's not that.
Yeah.
Go to a doctor. That looks like cancer. It looks
Yeah.
like it could be RSA. It could be one of 9 million things, And
Right.
you have people who said, "Oh yeah, I've been studying herbalism for the last 2 years."
Yeah.
And you're like, "No, honey."
No.
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 But it's all a matter of experiencing it and having that time in there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we call it a practice, because you're
Right.
always practicing. And truthfully, that's how it is with modern medicine too. It is a medical practice. All the doctors are practicing. It's just that they have the opportunity to practice intensely. And therefore, they can get up to speed and kind of recognize the lay of the land fast because they've seen so many patients.
Right.
And with herbalism, it's the same thing. How many plants have you seen? How many plants have you interacted with?
So many. I can't even tell you how many.
Right.
Every plant. I've never met a plant I haven't tasted. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Even the toxic ones. Even the toxic ones, because you have to experience it. What is your client gonna feel like when they take this?
Right. Yeah, and there have been plants and tinctures that I've tried that are not necessarily appropriate or suitable for my own health, like for where I'm at, but for someone else that I might be working with, they could be. So I want to see, what does that energy feel like? How does it change things in my body, and how does it change the way that I perceive my experience? So that way, when I connect with them and I'm talking with them, I can listen for the key words that describe how, what characteristics that this plant might connect well with that. And I don't know how to put that into words really well. So.
Well, no, it's important because you think about it. Like I think you were talking on one of your shows, one of your recent ones I listened to. You were talking about herbs for nervous system dysfunctions, and you were talking about mind chatter, right?
Yeah.
And so you were discussing the herbs that you would use for mind chatter. And of course, when I think of mind chatter, I think of like California poppy. That's one of the ones, and there's other ones that. But my experience with my clients and things, it may be different than your experience, but that's okay because our patients are different. We're going to try what we know and do a little experimenting, right, to see what works the best.
Yes, and it's just like, it is just like finding a physician or a good mechanic or whatever. You end up finding yourself drawn, if you really just listen to how you feel when you're talking to this doctor or this mechanic or whatever, you'll find yourself often drawn to the people that have the right medicine for you. It's all about listening. And the same thing happens with herbalists. I've had a couple of times where I've had people come to me and I know that I'm not the right person for them. And having a network of good herbalists allows me to say, well, I think you should go see this person instead because I think they're going to have the right medicine for you. And I imagine doctors and nurses kind of do the same thing.
Nope, they don't.
Oh, they don't? They don't send them?
No, unless it's a primary care to specialists, because primary care, they all want the business, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
They're driven by insurance rates.
Yeah.
It's not driven by anything other than the relationship and insurance rates. And so, unfortunately, they'll keep you because they want that revenue.
Well, that's disheartening, but it's probably true.
Well, I know it's true, actually, since I'm in that business now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So has it been hard to stay in that business rather than go leave like for your own school or for just I mean, I know that if you wanted to run a school and teach and, just do just herbalism, I know you would be incredibly successful, and that would be an easy, like the public, the people, we would all accept you very much and pay you well, but
I think I have a bigger role to play. So, I've thought of this for many years, as a nurse and as an herbal activist and, someone who's well respected in the field. I actually think it's part of my role is to make something better for everybody. And so one of the things I'm working on right now is creating a wellness clinic. So I started one before. It didn't come into fruition to what I exactly wanted. So this next one, I'm going to make exactly what I want.
Oh, yay.
And so I'm going to have the regular primary care doctor. I'm going to have nurse practitioners, but I'm also going to have the acupuncturist, and I'm going to have the herbalist and the aromatherapy and everything available for the patients in a holistic fashion. A nutritionist is one of the things. So these things, you don't get reimbursed as a traditional medical system. You don't get reimbursed for aromatherapy or herbalism. Some acupuncture, some insurances will pay for acupuncture, but not many. So having a holistic clinic to me is one of the biggest goals in my life, to create something that is truly a balance between, holistic, herbs and aromatherapy and modern medicine. And it can be done. It can be done, and it can be modeled and created and be successful.
Yes.
So
that's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that happen.
It will happen. I have to talk some people into spending lots of money.
Yeah.
But
which you will do. You will do that. I know you will.
Eventually.
And it also strikes me that, part of your role is helping to do some fixing in modern medicine and in fixing in the training of doctors by, doing what the plants do, slowly seeping into their consciousness.
Yes, like a disease. I'm like,
yes.
I will.
No.
Like a natural cure for a disease, though.
A natural cure for disease. That's a good one. That's better. But it's true, because I feel that, there is a way to bridge the two, and it's not hard. One system is based on, it's called fee for service. It's based on money. You get paid X number of dollars for X number of service, right? Yeah. Pretty simple. Yeah. But it's not the best quality care for patients. Yeah. And so we're moving to a value-based payment system. This is probably more than you want to know, but the value is that the patients stay out of the hospital, the patients stay healthier. Yeah. So in a value-based system, having more natural services makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does, because there is a point at which it is better to be going the very Western route. There's a point in any progression where you want, if you break your arm, herbs will support you, but you want a bone setter to fix it. So you want a doctor, because, best to not try and do that yourself.
Right.
Yeah. But if you can avoid having to see the doctor, that's even better. So
that's the goal.
Yeah. And that's where the herbs and the plants really, really shine.
Yeah. So if you can catch the disease early and then prevent it from, manifesting till its full potential, then you really, really do a lot to help your everyone, because you save money for the hospitals, save money for the government. Not that really matters, but you also help those people, because nobody wants to get heart failure.
Right.
Nobody wants to have, cancer and die. I mean, these things, a lot of them are preventable with diet, exercise, and herbs. So
yeah,
those are dreaded words, diet and exercise. I understand that, but those are very important.
And they do work. They do work. And once you get okay with them, they're actually not suffering. It's not suffering to eat right and to have a decent diet and exercise and all of that and sleep well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You get used to the taste of stevia, right?
Right. It's not so bad.
It's not so bad once you get used to it.
Yeah.
As Patrick makes a face.
Yes. I still haven't. We've tried the coffee substitutes a few different times, dandelion, chicory root, roasting the I've tried many different ones. Yeah, none of them actually substitute.
Yeah,
He-
no, I just
No.
won't have any sweetness at all.
But I do have him eating vegetables. So
Wow.
that's
That's
big.
impressive.
Well, we went like last year before COVID really, happened. We went vegan
Yeah.
for a while, and we were CrossFit and weightlifting.
It's about a year.
And
It was about a year of vegan diet for you.
well, no, not I wouldn't say a year. It was vegetarian for most of the year, but
Yeah.
not full vegan.
Yeah.
Vegan was the first 8 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah. But then you pretty much flirted with vegan and were more in that direction for the rest of the year.
Right. But I mean, I noticed lots of changes. I mean, I lost a lot of weight, and but it wasn't sustainable for me. There was just so many things that I really liked that they couldn't have, and I wasn't willing to just throw it all away. Or not throw it away, but choose not to have it. So
Yeah.
That's understandable. It's hard. We're bred, our instincts are to eat things that are high in carbohydrates and sweets because those are going to fuel us for fight or flight.
Yeah.
It's a biological necessity. Unfortunately, we don't run from dinosaurs anymore.
Right.
We run from things. We're sitting in our desks all day. We're not chopping wood, for 6 hours a day. We don't have need for all of those empty calories, so it does make it harder.
Yeah, and I mean, we were both, Patrick's from a northern climate where there's very much a culture around meat and potatoes,
Yeah.
and so when you go vegan, you're really saying no to a lot of those cultural trainings, and there's a deep psychological or emotional piece to that's hard to change.
It's all based on dopamine in your brain. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
So things that make you satisfied and happy increase the dopamine in your brain, therefore you're happier. Yeah. So if you take away those things that taste good to you and make you full and feel comfortable, you don't have the dopamine and you're not as happy. I mean, it is a hormonal and brain chemistry that we are wired. There's a doctor, oh God, I can't remember his name now. He writes on the obesity code and why people are obese, and it's not because we can't control. I don't remember his name. It begins with an F.
I'll find it. Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. So he writes this great book, and it talks about obesity. He's a renal doctor, a kidney doctor, and he wrote this stuff based on research. It's not because you don't want to eat. You're trying to avoid eating, right? But you're bred, your body over thousands of years has developed to be like this. These things don't change overnight. Right. You can't just say I'm going low fat, and then not eating meat because your body was bred to do that for thousands of years. I try to tell people, and some people can go vegan and some people can't. Yeah. Some people can go vegetarian, some people can't. I tried to become a vegetarian at least 3 times. I worked with a nutrition coach. I worked with, a hypnotist, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because I don't like a lot of killing animals if I don't have to. I mean, psychologically, I don't like that. I mean, but honestly, I finally talked to one of my doctors. It was my OB, actually, my GYN doctor. And he's like, you're part Native. He treated my grandmother. That's why. He treated my grandmother, too. So he's like, you're part Native American, aren't you? And I go, well, yeah. And he goes, well, of course you need meat. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. I was like, well, actually, maybe that makes sense why I need meat, because that's how my culture survived. They dried meats and vegetable berries and things, and that's what they ate. So they didn't have grain. They didn't have, corn doesn't grow, very easily up north all year long. So, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, for me, going vegan I tried several times for me, it was about 1.5 years of vegetarian diet. And the vegetarian part was super easy. The vegan part was not. I found that the dairy part of my diet was really, really important. It was much more important to me than I ever dreamed possible, because I don't think of cheese as a comfort food, or milk or dairy. They don't in any way say to me, oh, I really want that. And in my previous to vegetarian diet, I wasn't going out of my way to find dairy and have it. But then once we switched to vegetarian, I really wanted the dairy. And I think it was like a replacement for whatever the comfort was. It was an adequate replacement for that dopamine hit.
And that's really, it's all chemicals. And when you
Yeah.
think about this, go back to herbs, you have chemical reactions in your body that we're just learning about.
Yeah.
And we literally don't understand our own brain yet. They tell you we know so much about the human body, but they just found a new hormone that was secreted by the heart recently. And
Nice.
so we just learned this.
Yeah.
We've been studying, anatomy since, we knew how to do that.
Right.
So, this is just new. We are learning still about our own bodies and our own things. So I think the herbs, since they're natural, have more of an ability to adapt to the human body, since plants and us have been like this together, working and living and living on this planet since the beginning of time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah.
Modern medicine is only like 150 years old.
Yeah.
If it takes our bodies so much time to, change dopamine signals, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Right?
It totally does. Yes. And that's one of the ways in which the plants help meld those divergent paths or blend the paths and bring them into a place of balance and health, just like they do with everything. I mean, like your careers. They've helped you create a wonderful, balanced, healthy career and vocation, or whatever the right word is, through that ability to meld and blend.
Oh, it's called The Obesity Code. Oh, shoot. The Obesity Code is what it's called, the book.
Yeah.
And it's by Jason Fung, Fung.
And I will make sure I have a link for that in the show notes too.
Yeah, because that's a good book, and it talks about the real chemistry of why people eat and overeat, and how it really doesn't. Yeah. It's not your fault. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it's not. I think it's what we eat too. So if you go eat McDonald's, I'm sorry, I can't find one person who says that a McDonald's hamburger and French fries fully satisfies them for 4 hours.
No.
Usually it's like 40 minutes because it's so overprocessed.
Yeah.
That it's just not good food. Yeah. So there is that balance between what's holistic and food and what's, not
yeah.
food.
Yeah. As close to home cooked as possible is usually the best way to go, if you can. If you can,
So have you tried cooking with herbs?
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Good. That's fun to do.
Yeah.
I make a soup like every winter before flu season that has like the mushrooms and nettles and all of that stuff. And food is medicine. So I make it and I put it in my freezer in like little bags or little containers, little plastic containers. And then before you feel like you're not feeling so good, like you're going to get sick, you take out your medicine, right? Which is that homemade soup.
Yep.
And then eat that.
Yeah. In fact, I do bone broth, but then I add to it a lot of like astragalus and, the roots. And then I can that as my soup stock, which is how we make soup all year long. And, worst case scenario, when you're not feeling well, you grab a pint of the stock out and you get the miso paste and stick a dab of that in there. And then if you're not well enough to get the seaweed, then you just take it like that as a broth. Otherwise, you just dump some seaweed or some frozen vegetables or whatever it is that feels okay in there. Heat it up and there you go. I mean, simple. But
the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So Dawn, where can people find you?
So I have my website, which is dawnsenchantedgarden.com.
Okay.
That is probably the best place to reach me on my website. I also teach at Matthew Wood School, which is the Matthew Wood Institute of Knowledge. All
right. Is your book still for sale?
It is. It's on Amazon.
And what's the name?
The Enchanted Garden, a spiritual herbal, is on Amazon.
Perfect.
And I'm writing a book on incense and a book on facial diagnosis right now at the same time.
I'm excited. That's going to be really fun.
It is.
Absolutely.
The research for the book, the incense book, is interesting.
Oh, I bet. Because, yeah, I mean, incense is medicine, but we don't think of it that way.
It is medicine.
Yeah.
It is. And it's funny because you can use incense just as easily as you could drink a tea. And it actually works faster.
Yes,
It
yes.
your gastrointestinal tract.
Okay, I knew this was going to happen. You two,
Oh.
we need to break off now.
Okay, we're going to have to save that for the next show.
So when we have a guest, we always ask them to say our tagline with us. And you've listened to a few podcasts, so do you know how we end the podcast?
What is it? What is the tagline again? Put a plant on it?
Put an herb on it.
Put an herb on it, sorry.
Right. Okay. So you ready? 1, 2, 3.
Put an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.